Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
This one comes straight from you, our listeners. We got a ton of requests to dig into the effectiveness of fMRI technology in spinal diagnosis, so that's what we're doing today.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, it really should. We've got Professor J. Christopher Westland's research paper, Parable of the Fish.
Ah, yes, that's a fascinating one.
And it all starts with, well, a dead salmon.
Oh, that's right, the dead salmon study. A classic.
Yeah, but we'll get to that. First, for those who might not be familiar, how does fMRI technology actually work? What is it doing?
Right. Well, fMRI, it stands for Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging. And basically, it measures brain activity, or really, it measures blood flow changes that are related to neural activity in the brain and the spinal cord.
Okay, so more blood flow, more activity.
Exactly.
Fine.
So, like, in the past 2 decades, fMRI has become really popular for helping diagnose spinal problems.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, back pain's a huge issue. It impacts so many people. And doctors wanted a clearer picture of what was going on in the spine. They thought fMRI could give them that. Pinpoint the source of the pain and lead to better treatments.
Okay, so like a technological breakthrough in treating back pain.
That was the hope, yes.
So what happened?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated. Despite this incredible technology, treatment outcomes for back pain haven't really seen a significant improvement.
Really?
Yeah, and on top of that, the cost of treating back pain in the US has just exploded. It's something like $90 billion annually now.
90 billion.
Yeah, that's comparable to what we spend on cancer.
Wow. So a lot of money, not a lot of progress, it sounds like.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is that before the 1970s, when bed rest was the main treatment for back pain, most patients actually improved.
How interesting.
But then in the 1990s, when fMRI and other imaging technologies came on the scene, suddenly we saw a surge in more invasive treatments like epidurals and surgeries. Oftentimes, these were prompted by what these scans were showing.
So we're seeing more, but not necessarily understanding it better.
That's a really good way to put it.
Professor Westland, he uses this phrase, treating the image and not the patient.
Yeah, and that gets at the heart of the issue. fMRI produces these incredibly large data sets, enormous, and they are prone to errors.
Okay.
Plus, brain processes, especially those tied to something like pain, well, they're not always neat and tidy. They don't just light up one specific area. They're complex and can be spread out. So interpreting the data becomes incredibly tricky.
So how do researchers analyze this data? How do they even start to make sense of it all?
Well, one common method is using what are called partial least squares regression models. Basically, they're statistical models that try to find patterns in the data, relationships between different areas of the brain, and the experience of pain. But these models are only as good as the data you feed into them.
Right, and you were saying that fMRI data can be messy.
Exactly. And this is where the dead salmon study comes in.
Okay, finally, the dead salmon. Lay it on me, what happened?
Okay, so Craig Bennett, he was a neuroscientist at Dartmouth. He got a whole Atlantic salmon from the supermarket.
Wait, from like the fish counter?
Yep, just a regular salmon. And he put it in the fMRI machine. Now, you might think this was just to, test the machine or something.
Yeah, calibrating, something like that.
Right. But Bennett, he had a little fun with it. He decided to show the dead salmon pictures of humans in social situations.
Hold on, he showed a dead fish. Photos of people?
He did. And not only that, he followed a strict protocol. Like, he would ask the salmon to, identify the emotions in the photos.
Okay, so we know the salmon wasn't answering.
Of course not.
So what happened? What did the scan show?
Well, get this. The fMRI data, after it was analyzed, it suggested that the dead salmon was actually processing the images like it was thinking about them.
A thinking dead fish. Come on.
I know, right? It sounds crazy.
So is the machine broken?
No, the fMRI machine was working just fine. But the study became this sort of humorous anecdote in neuroscience circles.
Okay.
But it also sparked some really important discussions about the statistical methods being used to analyze fMRI data.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going.
Yeah.
So it's not that the fMRI is useless,
No, not at all. It's a powerful tool.
but the data can be misleading.
It can be, especially if the underlying model, the assumptions you're starting with, are flawed. And this is really the crux of Professor Westland's argument in Parable of the Fish.
It's not enough to just have a fancy machine and a ton of data.
Right. You need to be really critical of how that data is being interpreted.
So, back to back pain. How does the dead salmon study, how does this all connect to the limitations of fMRI in spinal diagnosis?
Well, it suggests that we need to be cautious. Just because an fMRI scan lights up a certain area in the spine doesn't necessarily mean that's the sole source of the pain.
It could be a false positive, like the salmon.
Exactly. There might be other factors at play that we're not fully understanding yet. Maybe things like lifestyle choices, or underlying health conditions, or even the way a patient perceives pain. These could all be playing a bigger role than we currently realize.
It's like we're looking at a piece of the puzzle but missing the whole picture.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's about recognizing the limitations of the technology. fMRI is a fantastic tool, but it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
We need to combine it with other diagnostic tools with a better understanding of the patient as a whole to truly improve treatment outcomes.
I think that's a great takeaway. So to our listeners out there, next time you hear about a groundbreaking fMRI study, especially related to something as complex as back pain, remember the dead salmon. Remember to question the underlying assumptions of the research and how those assumptions might be influencing the results.
Well said. It's about asking the right questions.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Until next time.
See you then.